Audio's fine. Okay, cool. All right, then we are going to get started. So I like to do this kind of the same way every time, which is what do you want to start with? I know you've got some topics listed. I haven't even read them yet. So do you want to kick this off?
Sure. Let me actually bring that doc back up because I had it on my other monitor.
Yeah, and if you need me to
Um,
link it, let me know.
yeah, so uh I guess like work reprioritized a little bit. So like some of the stuff that you were talking about, that you have in your questions, I think might not have, like I haven't had a chance to meet with the staff engineer yet.
Hmm.
It's on our like he knows that I want to meet with him about it, but we just have had other stuff pushed in front of that. Um, but yeah, other than that, it's just been kind of like sick kids dealing with that,
I see.
you know.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
by the way, that can like I talk a lot about cutting yourself slack and we talk about validation and everything. The sick kids part can inflate to fill all of your remaining time. So I'm guessing, have you had as much time to work on your side project, the React Native thing?
Oh no, no.
Yeah,
Like yeah, it's pretty much 100% children other than work.
I see. Okay. Well, we can still talk about the work part of these things. Let me read through what you had here. Leaning into planning, research, triage, delegation. Okay. So that is what you're talking about then, right? The
Yep.
stuff. Okay. Yeah. So why don't you tell me more about that? How has this stuff been going?
Yeah, so in my last one-on-one with my manager, he kind of said like he said something to the effect of like you're super valuable to me as like a um can't remember the phrasing exactly, but it was something to the effect of like I know that you can run projects and I don't have the um like my manager was saying this, I don't have the ability to monitor the things like debt and make sure that the nitty-gritty is getting done, code quality, that kind of stuff. So like me being I'm switching back and forth between his his me and my me, but basically that he's going to rely on me for doing some of that stuff on the client code level, since he can't manage that stuff. So I've been trying to lean into that, and that's something we had talked about before, is like getting better at delegation, kind of like shifting some of my time from IC to um, you know non-IC work, and I'm trying to lean into that. Um, because the company post on-site, the company um, has a new focus on pairing on projects rather than everyone has their own project that they are solely responsible for and
Mm,
kind of like deliver it as fast as possible. So it's actually given us flexibility to like I can take care of some stuff that I know is debt. Um, I can delegate stuff to the other person that's on the project with me, that kind of stuff. So I've kind of been using that to feel better about doing less IC work.
okay. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about those high level tasks that you have monitoring code quality, making sure there's no tech debt. Are you confident in your ability to do that sort of thing? Do you feel like there's a lot of growth there for you?
Yeah, I think I'm good at that because I'm like a very avid notes taker. So like things because of my like ADHD past, I've developed good copes to deal with forgetting stuff, and so I'm really good at remembering stuff or like creating systems to remember stuff. So I think I'm a good person to handle that kind of work.
Okay, good. Yeah. And I want to talk about how this plays into validation. So your manager had said, "Hey, I'm pretty confident in what you're doing. There's no way I can handle all of my job and also look into the nitty-gritty of your job." And that's
Yeah.
reasonable. By the way, I wouldn't expect them to be able to do that. And otherwise, why did they want to make you more senior if they could do that still? So, they've expressed their confidence in you. You sound like you're confident in your ability to do this part that we've talked about so far. So, is this when you look at this stuff, when you see this happening, does this make you think we're on the path toward improving the anxiety, the self doubt?
I think so. I don't know if it's like I feel like I have less imposter syndrome about managing projects than I do about my code being the best code.
Okay.
So I think like that shift feels comfortable to me because it's shifting into something I'm like more confident in.
So let me ask you something. Let's say you never coded another line of code in your life, but you were still always an asset to your company. You appreciated the work you were doing. Would that really be a problem? I know we've talked about this, and I know you said you wanted to improve your code skills, but just let's say you never did.
Um, I I want to stay somewhat involved in IC just because like that's been my like my passion and my I get a lot of gratification from making stuff. So I
Yeah.
think I would love to be a force multiplier for people doing work and also like being able to keep track of everything. But I think I would be upset if I never got to code at all.
Okay. And I probably asked you this in session number one, but side project coding when your kids aren't sick doesn't make up for that.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's just right now, the only time I get to work for solid amounts of time is at work. So I think, at least for this point in my life,
Yeah.
holding on to that is important. I'm not sure in the future. I never felt like I wanted to go down the managerial track. I thought staff was kind of like a good mixture of like, uh, IC and non-IC work. That's how I
Th-
see it.
Does this represent a change in your goals essentially? Because now that you sort of talk about this like this is a path I hadn't considered. You originally mentioned wanting to be staff. I assume staff exists in multiple forms. Usually it exists as an individual contributor and as a manager. And so are you saying that now while staff is still a goal, you're thinking more, excuse me, you're thinking more the manager route?
No, I think staff, like I'm just getting exposure to the parts of staff that are not IC work.
Okay, I see.
And I think I like that stuff as well. So like I kind of haven't had the opportunity to do this stuff before.
Okay. So you're saying some things that are interesting, and I'm maybe reading between the lines here a bit. Uh, you like the non-individual contributor parts of the job. You still want to be coding. If you were to get chunks of time available to you in your spare time, like you said, after you put the kids to bed, perhaps that could be sated, your desire to code, by doing this in your personal time. I'm not suggesting that you expand your work-life balance in that way. But what's interesting about this is our careers take us on paths that we don't always expect. And I think if you became a staff level manager and you were like, you know what, I'm happy with this. And the thing I had self doubt about, maybe your code quality or your own coding skills, those don't play into the job role anymore. It's like you
Hmm.
can still learn, you can still manage other people. And when you do get a hankering to code something for yourself, you end up taking on a project, or maybe you have some flex time at work, maybe 10 or 15%, where you could say, you know what, I'm going to step in a little bit more. And this is what happened to me a bit at Google. My managers toward the end of my time there, they loved coding still, but they rarely got time to do it. And so when they did get time, they cherished that. And then they got to tackle a project that they wanted to tackle, and they got to be involved where they wanted to be involved. If your career were to take you on that path, I don't think you'd be upset necessarily, but it wouldn't be where you're trying to steer yourself now. So how open are you to that being the result that you get?
As long as I'm kind of like satisfying that creative aspect of the job, like I think I would be comfortable as that being an option. Um, I hadn't really like thought about that before, and I kind of was like very so earlier on in my career, I actually like was being positioned too early for leadership roles, I think. And I kind of reacted to that and got another job as an IC, and tried to like, and which was I think was a good choice because I was basically like a mid-level engineer that was getting, you know, prepped for the CTO of a small company, and
Yeah.
like I was not ready for that, and I wanted more experience. And so like that kind of turned me off of like the stuff that they were having me do that was management wise was uh, I, I really disliked it because it was like uh, brick and mortar, you know,
Yeah.
IT like security camera and stuff, and I was just like it was a bad experience. So like I leaned super hard the other way. Um, but as far as like working on a bigger team, that seems like I really like that that part, that collaboration.
Yeah, and this is one of the things where if you never re-examined why did I leave that more brick and mortar business, the management opportunity, you might not have thought, could this new thing fit into that? Now, I don't want to steer you in a direction you don't want to go in. I'm just trying to interpret what you're telling me. And it sounds like your anxiety comes more from the IC part of doing this stuff. And also you like what you're doing now. Those two things combine into, hey, let's at least keep this on our radar and see what happens if you just keep growing in this way. The other thing you need to consider, I might have talked to you about this already. Have you seen Goodwill Hunting?
Hmm.
Yeah. So, math genius who basically didn't want to be a math genius. And so, what if your true skills align with you're going to be the best manager that company's ever seen, but you're like, no, I want to stick to the IC route. I think you should have the freedom to stick to whatever route you want. And yet, at the same time, you might get the gratification, you might get the whatever promotions, rewards, success, enthusiasm that you have that might only show up through that route. So, something to consider. Let's at least kind of keep an eye on this.
Sure.
And yeah, I'll write this down too. Keep an eye on
It'll be
whether.
very surprising. My dad has been, my dad's in sales, and I've always been like, I have the opposite personality of him, and like I always wanted to be like an IC, go deep into problems type person. So it's interesting that it like that might be a part of my path.
It might be. And the other thing too, if you picture someone who's good at sales, I do not picture the same personality without knowing anything else, just whatever stereotypes I have in my head. I don't picture sales, genius to be the same as engineering manager genius. They have
Sure.
different personalities in my mind. And you've probably seen the gamut across your managers that you've experienced too. And yeah, so I think I don't know. It's something I want to keep an eye on. And I don't want to steer you away from this, but it's like you might be sort of getting some signs that this shift is a good thing. So let's at least keep an eye on it. The other thing I wanted to say is you said you've had an opportunity to delegate more. You have more duplication on projects so that if someone were to go on vacation for a month, it's not like they're the only person who has that expertise. Um, I think of this as a great way of growing your skills, but delegation is also a really good way of growing the person you're delegating to. And so, do you look at things in that way? Are you considering where they want to grow their careers, where their interests lie, where their strengths lie?
Yeah, so definitely I haven't had any like I don't have scheduled one-on-one meetings with any of the people that are kind of like I'm delegating stuff to because they're not like directly underneath me.
Mm,
Um, but I do think about the skills that they have and things that like may show up as like not as trained on code reviews and stuff like that, and I kind of like try to allocate tasks in that direction so they can learn. Like one of them was like there's I came up in a code review that like I would like the way that this layout was built only works for like one viewport.
hmm
And so like I had them refactor the layout with Flexbox and kind of like learn more responsive stuff. So I was kind of I had a mentor at my first job that was very big on like taking the time to assign work that is very critical, like that is specifically useful to the skills that you want to develop.
Yeah.
And my manager actually mentioned that as um, part of the that last meeting was that that skill set is really good for us looking to hire. We're only hiring like very staff people and very junior people right out of college. So he said that skill is really useful because we're going to be bringing on more juniors.
Yeah, I see. Um, Everything you've said about your manager, by the way, has been a positive thing that you've shared. Uh, and I think that's interesting because if you've ever heard someone complain about somebody else, you hear the negative things about that person, and you always think, what's the other side of that, right? I'm hearing the opposite. I'm hearing the positive things, and I'm not wondering what's the negative side. I'm just thinking you seem to respect this person, and they've always seemed to have your back, and they've always seemed to appreciate what it is you bring to the table. And so I hear about your self doubt and the needing validation. It sounds like you've been a rock solid contributor to the team. So I would try as much as possible to quell any thoughts otherwise because you have no
Yeah.
signs indicating that that's the case. Um, Now, with this thing about your manager appreciating your skill set here, there's one thing I wanted to add. Are you ever considering the timeline of a project in addition to these skills and gaps that people have?
Yeah. We don't have hard deadlines, thankfully. We don't have
Okay.
like customers that are waiting for features. It's kind of we're shipping on a roadmap. Um, And that's by design. We did, like, last year we had um, kind of like a poorly run project that we had promised to a customer,
Hmm.
and it was like a death march for a while.
Yeah.
And I think as a reaction to that, we've gone like super far the other way. Like, don't tell customers about specific features on a timeline, that kind of stuff. So with the SaaS model that we're in, it works for that, and so we don't have hard timelines. But I think that is like the balance I'm trying to strike is like, I want to teach you a little thing on everything you do, but not like, I'm not going to make you spin your wheels for too long
Yeah.
before
Okay.
getting to the next thing.
I think that's good because one of the things I was going to say is sometimes there's a business need to get something out, and it's probably tempting to put a very senior person on it to just get it done. But then, hey, the junior person who could have learned. So anyway, it sounds like all that's in your
Yeah.
head. Sounds like that's going well. You mentioned, let me just scroll back up to the top here. So planning, research, triage, and delegation. So no concerns on your radar about any of those?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, like, I'm still showing up as like lesser on the points scale in retros, but like, I'm just not caring about it,
Okay.
or I'm trying not to care.
Yeah. Yeah, for sprints, but trying not to care. So let's just drill into that for a sec. The trying not to care. Is it still getting to you? Is it still something that's been tough to see? Hey, other people have higher point totals at the end.
It's it's getting to me less. I have noticed that, like, it's almost like the more junior someone is, the more points they have,
Yeah.
and like, that might be just like how they're allocating points. Like, they don't have the same time scale. We don't have matching time scales at all on the team, so it's like totally arbitrary to compare. Um, I just like always have a little bit of work that I don't get to every sprint, and I that bothers me.
Okay. And yet, okay. So here's one other thing, and you already must recognize this. So hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm preaching to the choir here. Uh, to have work at the end of a sprint means that something is going into the backlog that already came from the backlog, right? So it's
Mhm.
like you already have this massive amount of backlog as a team, and you've taken a tiny little like rock chip off of it and said, I'm gonna put this back. So regardless of whether you unless you overworked yourself, there's always going to be that massive amount of tasks that don't get done.
Right.
And
Sure.
the next week you could always tackle it, or the next sprint, or whatever it is. Uh, anyway, that's that. And I'm sure, like I said, that you realize that. So let's see, what else do you have here? New focus on collaboration throughout the team. Um, yeah, and before we get to this, actually, so the onsite, I want to talk about that for a second. How do you feel now looking back? Because now this was slightly over a month ago.
Um, the I do feel a little bit bummed because there's a lot of inside jokes that I missed, like a lot of you know, a lot of humor that I'm uh like not privy to, but I'm kind of trying to reinforce things that I can control. Like, we people have started going to the co-working like huddles in Slack that I organized.
Hmm.
And so I'm getting more like conversational with people and getting more like social time in general, less isolated, I think. Um, so like, I'm like, I can't control it. Like, it is what it is. Like, they hung out and I didn't get to hang out. So I'm just doing what I can to make myself friendly, I guess, with the rest of them.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. It's like I said about your manager. You say positive things about your manager to me, and there's got to be some complaint somewhere. I'm not asking for it. It's just like you're sharing the positive because that's what you think about. And so when I asked you about this, the first thing you jumped to was the camaraderie aspect, the humor, the inside jokes that get shared, and not necessarily, hey, they made a ton of progress without me, or it
Hmm.
was that aspect. And I
Yeah.
recognize you're a remote employee. You said you haven't really been able to meet up with these people. Maybe some of them you've, yeah, and you probably wanted to meet. So I think you're doing the next best thing, which is until the next onsite, which you're hoping to make it to. You've been starting these huddles. So how long has that been going on for?
Um, I probably have been doing so. It's like once a week, maybe for the last like it started before the on-site, so maybe like 8 weeks or something.
Got it. Okay. And what's the turnout like?
So it was like nothing until after the on-site. Like it's totally optional, so like people either join the room or don't. But it was nothing essentially until um yeah, like the 1 week or two after the on-site, and then people have been joining every time now.
Okay. Yeah. And you're happy with that turnout?
Yeah, I mean it's nice to just talk about stuff, either work stuff that comes up or just non-work stuff, just like what are you into, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And this is maybe one of the most specific questions I'll ever ask. Have you had any nuance inside jokes with people as a result of these co-working sessions?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah. So they serve that purpose, at a smaller scale, but more often, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think this is good. Look, a lot of this is you can only count on the path being the right path so far, the trajectory being the right trajectory, and this is a positive slope. And that's it. So, look, if this continues to go well, if you want to expand this, if you want to start meeting with some of these people, or, one time someone mentions a movie that they watched and you're like, oh man, we should talk about that. By the way, I've done that before. Sometimes someone will send out an intro email. Hey, I'm new to the team. I'm really into Zelda. And I'll send them an email and be like, oh, I just got Tears of the Kingdom. And so, yeah, you never know how that stuff will go. I think it's good. You're forming friendships too, I hope, throughout this, and you're kind of
Mhm.
solidifying your position in the team. As a result of this, so you mentioned originally that you felt bummed. Do you feel heartened by this fact? Are you positive about the future of this, given that you're doing these co-working huddles?
Yeah, I think so. It seems like the yeah, what you said, like there's a positive slope to it. So I feel like um, we are, especially like between teams, like we didn't have a lot of conversation, so it's like good to have these like cross team hangout sessions. Especially like even like what are you working on type thing, and it's like, oh, that's kind of like tertiary to my task, and I get a better idea of what your timeline is and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. This is great. No, I think this is great. I wanted to see if you did too, because if not, we could talk about how you want to improve it or anything. But it sounds like this is good. I'd keep doing that. Yeah, and just kind of see where that goes. So okay, that was my interlude before we got to this next one. You wrote new focus on collaboration throughout the team after the onsite. Manager challenged me to take advantage of it. So how is that taking form?
Um, so yeah, part of that was the co-working sessions. It seems like that is probably influenced directly because of the on-site. Like people
Yeah.
feel more comfortable hanging out. Um, um, yeah, I mean, so we've been pairing on projects more. So I don't really know how to like specifically take advantage of the fact that they have better relationships now, but I'm kind of just um, trying to involve more people in conversations.
Hmm.
Uh, and that seems to be going well. I don't really know specifically like how to action on that like challenge.
Well, when was this challenge presented to you?
It was like so like in the wake of the on-site where like I think I had messaged you that day that was like uh we had like kind of a rough like experience for the people that didn't go on to the on-site.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then my manager like addressed it, and he in that conversation um had said like you need like use this momentum uh to kind of like do what we need to do. And
Okay.
that's like a challenge for you as a more senior person.
Okay, I see. So, all right. Again, maybe this is my interpretation, and this might sound blunt. I think this was maybe a throwaway comment in the wake of what was discussed, and not a "Hey, I'm going to track this. This is like OKR level work." Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, it hasn't come up again.
he's not looking for follow up or something. Okay, I see. So then, what I would say is, um, and maybe you're not even concerned about this, but almost like treat it as a throwaway and like, yeah, well, if I can't think of a way to take action on it, then I just won't. And if something had come into your head, if you had 5 ideas, I'd be like, oh, by all means, pursue them. But if nothing's coming to mind, then yeah. So yeah, sounds like a throwaway comment. No need to take action. Okay. Let's see. Seems to indicate a reduction of breakneck feature delivery and a new push for robustness. This you'd mentioned, a year ago you had a push for, you had a death march. Uh, Reduction of breakneck feature delivery. So what is that about then?
Um, so we're doubling up on projects. So like the projects do end up getting done fast, but not everybody is on their own solo project with their own
Oh, I
fast
see. Okay.
timeline. So it seems like we have that flexibility of like if one person has to do another task off project,
Yeah.
like the stuff work's still getting done, so there's still progress happening.
And how are people responding to this in general? Do they like the duplication, the pairing up?
Yeah, I think it's only been positive in
Okay.
response because like people are doing pair programming sessions, people are doing. I think it's challenging for people to break tasks down into like shareable things, chunks sometimes, especially like on if you're working on the same components or like on the same routes where components might like change
Yeah.
and things like that. Like rebasing becomes hard, but other than that, I think people have been positive about it. Planning needs to be super hardcore though, or like way harder than
Yeah.
before.
Well, and you mentioned in session 2 that you started to do that, a planning bit of each task that you took off. And I'm guessing that as the more senior people are probably doing that breakdown. This is a very interesting development though, because this push seemed to come out of the last month or two, not even two, right? Last month or so.
Mhm.
Where can you trace the pairing up to?
I think it was something that came out of the onsite. Like they kind of like how it was framed to me in my one-on-one was people like have this social energy now,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna use that to have people work together on projects, so not everybody's so isolated, and how there's only one project owner for each feature,
Yeah,
or like project like designated person.
I see. Look, I think it was the right call. I especially think when it's a largely remote company that this is very important because otherwise, I think work turns into this obfuscated mask of like I put in time and like I don't see people, I don't go outside to do my work, I don't there's no commute. So I think that can be tough for some people and I think we're naturally social creatures and want to work with each other anyway at some point. Plus the thing is even if you're working on your own project, you're working for some larger greater good of the team. So I think this is really good. I'm glad they made this decision. And part of the reason I even take the time to talk about this is it's worth recognizing when the company's moving the right direction. I've worked at companies before that are so large that we would get these surveys of like, how do you feel about the CEO and what they're doing? How do you feel about the VPs? And I'm like, I have no insight in any of that. Like, I'm some leaf node
Yeah.
worker 7 hops away from the CEO. And so you're seeing these actions being taken as a result of a dynamic aspect of your team. Hey, people got together, so let's go harness that energy. And they did. And now people seem to be enjoying it. And I'd be curious to see if 6 months from now, people are still doing this sort of thing, if there's still that energy. And I wonder if the onsite serves as a way of re upping that energy so that they eventually make it biannual instead of annual. Because maybe that's what ends up happening. Maybe that's something you
Yeah.
end up proposing at some point as a result of, hey, I noticed that the social energy is waning. Let's get it back. Let's do more on-sites. So yeah, I wonder if this will be the case in 6 months or so. Wonder if another on-site is in store.
That makes sense because like before the onsite, like it seemed to be like in an all-time low,
Mm-hmm.
like in terms of like people are, they show up for the stand up and like they barely chat in Slack, and then the PR comes in and that's like the only interaction. But like it definitely picked way up after. Um, even like the Slack channels that aren't directly work related, just like
Yeah.
talking about music, that kind of stuff. Like people just like are involved more.
Yeah, very interesting. Because if that is a trend that you see, I mean, I think this is part of becoming more senior at companies too, is noticing patterns other people don't notice and then acting on them before people even realize there's a problem. And a lot of times that comes out in the form of work. You see, hey, wait a second, this one person I delegated work to made a UI that wasn't responsive. maybe our team doesn't know about responsive UIs. And then you go and give a brown bag lunch or something, and now you've educated the whole team on a problem they weren't even aware of. And
Hmm.
that same thing happens culturally. So yeah, with these on-sites, I wonder if you were to talk to your manager or somebody and just say, hey, here's a thing I noticed, how they'll respond. And they might be like, you know what, you're right. Yeah, 3 months from now, I'm going to write a calendar reminder to see, has social energy lessened and what can we do about it? So yeah, I'd just say keep an eye on this. Okay,
Good
yeah.
idea.
So let's see, what's this next thing here? I've been trying to generalize some components across multiple features, help newer team members. Yeah, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so I just like it's kind of like the I think I was proud to kind of talk about how I generalized some stuff so that it could be shared between like we have a bunch of forms and
Hmm.
there's a lot of like UX that has been iterated on for uh, components in some parts of the app that people are making in other parts of the app
Hmm.
much simpler. So they lose that like all that iteration that we did on the first part. And so I've been trying to push for like let's use that shared component so that we get all the benefits of you know the image uploader has a cropper and has the correct accessibility,
Yeah.
uh, you know modal handling and stuff, uh, rather than it just being like an upload button in another place. And I've when I bring up that kind of thing, I think while the end result is good, there is some resistance from my manager
Yeah.
on premature optimization because he doesn't want people to build a UI library.
So wait,
And
there's resistance for using the shared components?
like for like kind of like encouraging people, like encouraging the whole team to think about making general UI and wasting time with
Oh,
that.
oh. Okay, so I think there are two pieces here. One is using a general component that already existed, and the other is making new ones where needed.
Yeah, I because I had brought it up as like um in a retro, like maybe there's like a way we could surface components that like we have Storybook, but like not everything is in there. Um, Maybe during planning we can call out components that have been used before that look similar to stuff in mockups.
Yeah.
Um, and it was kind of like like be careful about premature optimization. Like I'd rather people make the same thing multiple times, and then like the generalization comes from that.
Okay. They want, yeah, or I'll say they're okay with people making the same thing a bunch of times. Look, this is one of those things where it could work both ways. You see three of something that exists, so you say, okay, fine. Now clearly we've proven a need. Let's go make it into one thing, and let's make this one thing better. But then you could also see that, hey, this pattern repeats itself a lot of times, and it ends up creating tech debt. And you think, well, if I had a magic 8 ball that could answer, will this component turn into three components, and we need to turn it back into one? Then yes, of course you do it ahead of time, but you don't know.
Yeah,
So I wonder if there's some middle ground where once two of these exist that you say, okay, time for a common component. I wonder, is there
that's what I've
anything?
been doing.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so like the third time, I basically will generalize so that covers the first two times.
yeah. Okay. They make a common component. And are you satisfied with that? Are you okay with that as a compromise?
Yeah, yeah. I just like I thought it was weird that like maybe I had like phrased it in a way like I don't know if it was like he sees what I'm trying to say. He's worried about other people misinterpreting what I'm trying to say and kind of like hedging a little bit by making sure people know not to prematurely optimize.
Yeah,
I didn't put that like I'm on the third time. I haven't like said on the
yeah,
third time I'm going to generalize, but like that is my strategy for generalizing. I would never try to do it the first time.
yeah. I see. Okay. And part of this too is I think sometimes this is just how software goes. People, if you have too much like, hey, we need an image uploader. Okay, well, let's go find the right way of doing things. Let's wade through whatever documentation may or may not exist or the code base. Then what would have been a small task ends up turning into a medium or large one, or ends up involving other people. And sometimes people just want to go. And that's especially true when you have a company that's growing, because process gets added on to then make it so that things are consistent and that people are using these components all over the place. So I think that's part of the cultural growing pain of a company. And if you're happy with the compromise for now, I think that's probably as good as you can do. There was one other piece of this that I want to talk about, though, which I wrote down as junior wrangling. So you have this image uploader that you mentioned, and it sounds like, okay, that's already a common component and people need awareness of it. Do you ever feel like you're telling people, it's I'm telling person A today and I'm telling person B 4 days from now, and how do I let everybody know this stuff? Is that happening for you? Do you find yourself wrangling people?
Not yet. Um, I don't think there's enough people on the team for that to be like a an issue, but
Okay. Yeah.
I we are pushing for things to be developed like in storybooks so that there's like a documentation to features as they're developed now. There's just like stuff that's been that hasn't like there's a bunch of stuff from like the last year that didn't make it into it, so people don't know they should use it.
Yeah. I see. Okay. Yeah. I think everything's fine then. I'm not going to try to, point out problems where there aren't problems, but I do need to prod sometimes and figure out. Yeah. Now you did write the thing about co-working sessions here, and we talked about this. So what is this exciting email?
Yeah, I just got like a really cool job opportunity. Like it didn't work out. They filled the role before I could interview, but he said like he'll let me know the next time it comes up. Um, and it was for a staff level role, and it's the first time I've had any interest in me as a staff engineer. So, and it's like a pretty major company in like the React space. So, I was pretty excited about it, and I tried to like you know add him on LinkedIn and like not be too like thirsty about it, but just make myself available if the opportunity comes up again. And I also was like very nervous about like being underqualified for the role, but knew that I would have had to do the interview if it was offered because it was like that much of a you know opportunity.
Wow. Well, I got to say, first of all, congratulations. When we started in session number one, you said my timeline is 5 years, and in 3 months, you got an offer to be staff level. So that's certainly something.
Not an
And
offer, no offer for
well,
sure.
okay, offer to interview to eventually,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, whether or not that had worked out, it doesn't matter. They filled it for a totally benign reason, right? There's no way you could have gotten in fast enough, it sounds like. So, reaching out to this person, they said they'd keep you up to date. Did you ask them something like, how often do these positions come up? I know you said you didn't want to seem too desperate, but
No, I just said I asked if we could, if any time frees up and we could have like 15 minutes just to talk about like what work there is and what projects are coming up for the company in the future, um, so that I could like, skill up if I needed to in a certain arena,
yeah.
because I was interested in the company. So
And did that
that's the kind of
happen?
like,
Or was that a
no,
long?
I haven't really gotten a response.
And
The
when?
the person that emailed me was like pretty major in the
Mhm,
company, so like I was very surprised to get the email in the first place from that person.
I see. And when was that?
Like a week ago, maybe.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I think you're on their radar. And I don't think these are the kinds of things that people just ditch if they need somebody else. Usually you kind of have a network and you put the people who are at the top, they still end up being at the top. And if you ever leave a company, you might still get messages from them saying, hey, we want you back. Um, I think this is good. I think it's good that someone reached out to you. I think feeling underqualified, the feeling is normal. You are probably not underqualified. So your manager is currently giving you more responsibility, expecting you to do more. It sounds like you're delivering on it. And then that cycle repeats itself. Then your manager gives you more, you deliver on it, cycle repeats itself again. And so at some point, you've done that enough where you're just staff level and they haven't named you staff yet. And it's at that point that you start saying, well, look, when does this promotion come in? I've drastically changed my scope since I've started. So this is a sign that you're definitely headed in the right direction. It sounds like, you said you would have interviewed. How likely would you have been to take the job?
I mean, I I said like I think I would have interviewed expecting not to get the job.
Hmm.
Um, but if I would have been offered the job, there's a pretty good chance I would have taken that. I probably I have feelings about letting your current company counter,
Yeah.
um, because if they could pay you the amount, they should have paid you that before and all that. But um, yeah, there's like growth opportunity here. They're
Hmm.
like a later stage company, so there's less growth opportunity, but it would look better on my resume to be at a company like this. Um, I don't know.
Okay. No, and those are all totally valid thoughts to have about this of the whole, well, except for the I wouldn't have probably gotten it. I think you should have confidence in yourself. You would have gotten it.
Sure.
100%. Everything else totally fine. I agree with that. You never know how this is going to go. Encountering can be kind of controversial. Like I think there are some cases where you can take it, but then people always think like, doesn't that indicate that you're on your way out the door? You already interviewed for a place. So whatever, we could talk about that if that actually comes up. Yeah, and just see where that goes. If you do end up hearing from this person again, I'd love to have that be a bullet point for next time. So just to kind of see where this goes and what you did about indicating where are my gaps in relation to your company so that I can go get those skills. I think that's a really, really good signal to give off because it shows that you're very serious about it and not just, hey, I'm a know it all. I'm going to come in and be great on your team. The part about being underqualified, by the way, this is probably not all that helpful to talk about, but I always wonder how VPs or CEOs switch between companies because imagine being something like the head of Blizzard and then going and being the head of anything else. Just picture any other company, Ubisoft. Um, how do you do that? How do you ramp up? How do you
Yeah.
and so if those people can go between jobs and they can still prove that they're successful at the new jobs, then I think we can find ways to do that too. And especially if it's similar enough to your current space. So um
I guess also, I have never done a staff interview before,
mhm,
and I don't have any idea of what's expected at that level, and this is probably getting into the tier of company where they're not going to give me. I don't know how they interview. Um, I know that higher tier companies usually kind of, even for front end people, will go the lead code direction at least for one
yeah.
part of the interview. So I haven't had to do that in my career yet. I did a fizz buzz in my first job, but the rest of the challenges have been very related to front end work. Make an app, that kind of stuff. But so that's kind of like why I felt
I
underprepared,
see.
because like I would like to do staff level interviews for companies that I am not super interested in
Yeah.
working for before I get to the one I am,
Yeah, I know
if
what you mean.
possible.
And I think this is where almost any company should be willing to share with you, here's what our process looks like. And a lot of companies now, I think, will just say something like, if it's elite code, they'll just say, look, it's like a leak code style problem. And if you know that, then you can at least prepare for it. And then it becomes a question of how long do you tell them, hey, I need 3 weeks for this or something, or hey, now's a really bad time. What if I got back? So you could do some negotiation on the time for that because typically, if you're a good candidate now, you're going to be a good candidate 2 months from now. Um, but yeah, then there's a question of how much do you preemptively prepare for something that may never happen. And so I would probably make this more demand driven. If you did hear back and you found out, yes, we do leak code, it's 50% of our evaluation process. And I'd say, okay, time to start doing leak code.
Yeah.
Time to buy extra powerful medicine for your kids. So, but yeah, otherwise, I think I probably wouldn't start veering into that lane just yet. You did ask this, should I apply to the job posting anyway so my info is on file for the future? I would probably wait another week to see if you hear back from that person with whom you asked 15 minutes and then maybe
Mhm.
ask them this question. And if they don't get back to you, I'm not sure. I'd probably just ask in Discord what the general consensus is there. So yeah,
Okay.
maybe wait
I
for it.
didn't know if it was like it's good to be in the system, because I know like Google, I've heard you go into a database and then they can pull from that database in the future. So I don't know if it's like I should assert myself into their database or not.
Well, the thing is, they reached out to you in the first place, so they had some
That's
way
true.
of finding you, and that probably means they have something on file already saying we reached out to this person, but maybe not. Processes can be all over the place depending on the company,
Sure.
so I'm not sure. I had some things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, let's do it.
For one, let's start with this. So you did just mention one of them. What are your successes in the last month?
Um, yeah, so that was a nice little boost.
Hmm.
Just getting good feedback on projects I'm planning, and having that kind of go well.
Hmm.
Um, people like the project that I'm working on currently with another developer has come together really fast, and I think faster than people expected. So that's always nice to be on like the uh, delivering early.
Yeah. And the
Uh,
co-working huddles are going well.
yeah, that too.
Okay, one more. What's one more success?
Um, I don't know. I'm kind of blanking right now.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
So part of the reason I do this, and I think, what's kind of interesting about the current group of three mentees is I think you're all invested in each other too at this point, or at least it sounds
yeah.
like it. So, I'd ask Rami, hey, how are you going to celebrate? And he's like, I'm going to buy a cupcake and, get some frosting or whatever. Are you, you've noticed this. It sounds like things are going pretty well. I think things have probably been pretty hectic too, having sick kids, doing all this stuff. You're working on a side project before that. There's a lot going on. So, do you feel anything is worth celebrating of the successes you had here? Because I think even the things that sound mundane to other people, it's if you said, hey, I got 3 promotions in a row or something, it's like, okay, most people are going to be like, wow, that's amazing, congratulations. If you did something like, hey, this project is coming together faster than normal, people will be like, hey, that's great, and not throw a party or something. But
Mhm.
is there something you feel is worth celebrating here? Is there something you want to do to acknowledge and sort of solidify that success?
Um, honestly, like the way that I've been celebrating that kind of stuff is like giving myself some relief of anxiety. Like it relieves my anxiety a little bit, so it
Yeah.
feels like a celebration. Like I'm not as worried, I guess, for a period of time.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and I hope
I don't know if it's a cop out.
well, it's not. I don't think it's a cop out exactly. Although I would push for something explicit and something a little bit different. So something as simple as, yeah,
Like a
today.
ritual,
What was that?
like the ritual of it, like
Like,
do
yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly. Something that's a space in time that you can look back at and be like, here's what this is for, and not something that's always forward looking. Because I think we have that
Mhm.
tendency to do that, especially once you start getting more senior. It's like, what's the next step? What's the next step? So I'd at least consider that a little bit, and hopefully, eventually, you stave off the worry entirely. Your scope will probably always be at least slightly growing, unless at some point you decide, you know what, I'm happy with staff. I'm not going to try to get any higher than this. Then cool. Then you can start to, I don't know, work up that level yourself and be there the rest of your life. Um, so okay, yeah, and pushing this even just one step further. So if you were to celebrate even something very small, what might you do?
Um, let's see. I think my wife and I usually cash in on celebrations as opportunities to like order food
Hmm.
uh instead of preparing dinner.
Yeah,
Just because it's like a time saver and it's an energy saver. So like that's usually like how we cash in on things.
yeah. Okay,
So yeah, maybe just order dinner and like
okay.
not have to make it that night.
And I'm gonna go just one tiny step further. Pick a cuisine.
Hmm. Thai.
Okay,
The
great
Thai
choice.
food order is very expensive for us, but it's very good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. Well, I want you to keep this in mind, and I'm not saying you have to do this as a homework or something, but like I really think the celebrating successes thing is important, and that without it, I think we just keep jumping from thing to thing and never giving ourselves credit. So, and especially for what you've told me about validation, um, I think we have talked a bit about validation here, and so I want to get to this point that I had. Has your wife noticed any differences in your work related behaviors in the last few months?
Um, I don't know. I feel like I've articulated my feelings better about the subject. And so she understands like the process I'm going through of trying to reduce that. So maybe we haven't talked about like that she's noticed any difference, but like she's aware of the situation. She kind of like uh my youngest is going through like a developmental leap right now.
Hmm.
So when that happens, often the sleep gets really bad.
Yeah.
So we're like sleeping pretty poorly this week. But she like knew about my feelings about not getting to work enough and that kind of stuff, and kind of like created an opportunity for me to work on a Saturday to catch up, and that was like super relieving to me to like uh, just to relieve some of the internal pressure that I had.
Yeah.
So she's definitely helping me deal with the anxiety, uh, and at least understands what I'm going through,
Yeah. Okay,
even
that's
if it's
good.
not like what she feels.
Um, you said work on a Saturday though. You're saying because of the lost sleep, things got piled on?
So we talked about it before, but I don't have like I don't work like a nine
Oh,
to five.
yep.
So like if I lose some time during the week because I have to pick up the kids, I would work in the evening to make up for that time on that day. But with the recent sleep problems, I haven't been able to work in the evening,
Yeah,
and so I've just been like losing time. So like getting to make up a little bit of time, it kind of like let me relax a little bit about it.
I see. And what would happen if you hadn't done that? Do you feel projects would have slipped behind? Like, yeah, what would you see as the repercussions?
Um, Sometimes if I don't like get work in at the right point, it becomes even harder to get it in later. So like if I don't like prepare this part, the schema of the form before the rest of the work is done on the form, um, the rebasing becomes really annoying to do and stuff like that. So like there are things that are like chronologically better to slot in,
Yeah.
and it helps me kind of do that.
Okay. I see. So it's not that you're concerned how other people will react to this or that you'll have this feeling of falling behind all the time. It's that work will become markedly harder to do in ways that you can track due to, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable enough. And this is one of those things where you mentioned, you have the flexibility during the day, so then that flexibility sort of gets paid in the nights or the weekends. Okay, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
And um, I just, and you don't have to share if you don't want to, this developmental leap you're talking about, is it totally normal? Everything's fine? You think everything's going to go back to, okay, yeah. So you're going to get sleep again at some
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
It happened with my first kid. It's temporary. It's
Yeah.
just the brain developing.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think it's good. I wrote this down as a quick question. Where does your manager live in relation to you? I guess let's put it in terms of like hour long drive. Like, is it, 12 hours away? Is it like 40 hours away?
It's not drivable. I live in Arizona,
Hmm.
and they live in like outside of San Francisco.
Okay. I see. Yeah. So very far. Because one of the things I was going to suggest, I know you were bummed about not being able to meet your manager. Uh, is there some way you could set something up? And this is one of those moonshot ideas of like if it happened to work out, or if your manager's like, you know what, I was thinking of going to X location, which is close enough to you. And anyway, yeah, never mind. So I'll just leave it at
I
that.
was thinking about. I had talked to my wife about maybe like we'll do a trip to San Francisco, and like he would drive in. That if I had an opportunity to like work for a day or two while we do that trip. But yeah, it's something we talked about, but nothing concrete yet.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, panned out from that. I think that's reasonable enough. Toastmasters, I wanted to check out as well. So did you end up trying it out? Did you go?
No time. I looked
Yeah.
into it, but I haven't had an opportunity yet.
Okay. Yeah. Um, so still on your radar though, something you want to do, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's. I feel like every day I get a little bit better, but uh, taking the time to specifically work on that as a dedicated task, I think would be good. As a dedicated skill.
Yeah, I think it always starts with awareness. And the other thing is they're not doing anything that's magical there, right? They have a structure and they have people there. I think the people is the magical part. If you were to practice speaking in front of a mirror, it does not instill the same sense of nervousness that it would if you were in front of a stadium full of people, for example. And
Sure.
there's just no way to replicate that on your own, I think. But as far as paying attention to what words you're saying, yeah, you can totally do that. And if you're on your own or if you're watching a video of yourself. So I think it's good you're at least considering this stuff, and hopefully you're noticing some improvements in your meetings that you're having. Let's see, books, React Native side projects. So we talked about the kind of lack of time. Have you had a chance to read it all?
Um, I've just continued working on the refactoring book.
Hmm.
Um, but other than that, I haven't like started any new books. Just
Yeah,
kind of like reading a little bit at a time of that. It's kind of like at the once you get to a certain point in that book, it's talking about specific
yeah,
refactorings, and so like it's kind of slower to move through
yeah.
because it
And
has to like set up a situation.
Yeah, and if you've extracted most of the value of it, who knows? Maybe you could move on and not
Yeah.
worry about it so much. The last thing I had here that I kind of wanted to talk about is that I had ignored one of your bullet points now from, I guess, session number one. Do you still find this relevant? Do you see the selected text I have?
Yeah, so I've never worked at a company before. Like we have a staff level engineer here, but
Hmm.
before that, I had never worked with a staff level engineer. So I'm just curious as to like your insight of ones you've worked with in the past, uh, kind of like how they operated and what was like their like what was noticeable about their personality or you know things they did.
Yeah. So I think I think of staff level as being two completely different things. It's either the more individual contributor part or it's the manager part. And to be honest, as a manager, I don't think it's drastically different from the senior level managers, other than that they seem more refined and kind of polished in how they approach things, and they clearly have more experience doing it. And so it with managers, I find it's very hard to rattle a staff level manager. Like they're used to enough, they've seen enough, and their whole point of being there is to be able to absorb some of the stress so they don't pass it on to their direct reports
Oh,
and be able to
interesting.
see things at a high level. With individual contributors, I think what ends up happening is the way they talked about this at Google is a staff level engineer is usually creating problems and anyone below staff is solving the problems. And so it sounds kind of funny to say that you're creating problems as your job, but you are identifying areas that need to be improved. And this is sort of like what I was talking about with you earlier, where there's a pattern other people might not have even seen that you need to solve. And is everything okay, by the way?
Yeah, yeah. I think my wife is coming up. Can I BRB for like one
Yeah,
second?
yeah, totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
All right, empty chair. I want to ask you, what's your favorite programming language and why is it JavaScript? That's a compelling answer. But oh, hey again, I was talking to your chair. Um,
Sorry, my we have like a lock, like an un. You can't undo the lock from the outside, and she was like out front,
I
not
see.
able to get in.
No, no, totally fine. Yeah. So what I was saying is, I think with individual contributor staff level engineers, that they are creating problems for other people, and that is a very tough skill to identify what's actually worthy of the business's investment, and then finding the right people to do that. And then, and here's what I think is the hard part, is essentially seeing out that project. These may be year-long projects, and to me, and this is maybe getting personal to the point where it won't help you, but I never wanted to spend like a year or 2 years saying, here's a problem I want to tackle, and I'm going to go spend all my resources on this and do that. I felt like if I wanted to do that, I'd start my own company, which is why I started my own company. But that's what I think makes people staff level engineers is saying, I'm going to essentially form a startup out of this company, tackle this problem, and make sure it gets done. And so
Interesting.
does that clarify? Does that give you enough sort of insight into how I feel about this?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and that's like the. I mean, Google is kind of like the highest scale of company that where you would staff at. I imagine like they have the most engineers. So like a staff level engineer at Google would probably have. I guess it would take a year to fix that problem, right?
Yeah, a lot of times or many years. And in those processes, sometimes, you've proven enough, okay, first year went well, then they become, the next level of staff because staff is not where it stops at Google at least. But yeah, and so I think what I would kind of take from this is we all have an equilibrium we want to hit. And for some people, that's CEO. And so that's essentially the highest level you could achieve at a company if you think about it in terms of time investment. But for some people, it's senior. I want to be senior. I want to come to my work. I want to not think about work after work. And I've grown to the point where I'm happy. And now I just want to play, dodgeball after work all day. So I think if your equilibrium is high enough to want to be staff, and you've said that it is, that there is a lot of growing that still happens on the job, even to still perform at that level. And there are those big projects that you're going to have to tackle, whether or not you want to, and ideally you want to, so that you do your job.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's all my thoughts. If you ever have any other questions, feel free to ask. We are approaching the end of time, so I want to ask you the same thing I always do. How are you feeling in general? Still want to continue, still feeling positive. Where's your mentality at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been great. I think I've been actioning on stuff we talk about, and it's been positive. in work, and having another voice for my own like internal monologue, and having it like kind of like summarized on a cadence, I think is super helpful for me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad, and I'll say this every time. Thank you for doing this. There's a lot of very personal stuff we talk about, and like this is your life, and you're sharing it with the world. So I
Sure.
appreciate it. I'm glad you're taking this all seriously too. I see you trying to take action on some of these things, and for other things, it's like when the opportunity comes up, I know that you will. And so I'm hoping that this next month or 6 weeks or however long it is we end up taking, that one, you can get more sleep and just kind of, recharge a bit. And if nothing happens outside of work, that's totally fine. I'm not going to say let's push these meetings so that they're 3 months apart or something. We'll just talk about work stuff. So yeah, great job. And
All right.
yeah, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Yeah. All right. See you, Kyle. Bye.